The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is The Loudness, where our random, rowdy, and raunchy band of misfits create top 10 lists of life's most insane shit. Be scared. Nothing is off limits. So congratulations.
You just made the list!
Greetings and salutations. I'm the Music God CJ Plain, and this is another edition of The Loud List. Yes, I know this one is late. It has been a crazy week. I did not get a chance to get any interviews lined up, to record anything. So this is going to be another solo one from me. And today, I've had this list for quite a while. It's not necessarily a top 10 or anything, but I have a list of 30 records that influenced me the most as a music listener, as a fan of heavy music. And these are all rock and hard rock and metal records, by the way. It's just going to be a list of 30 records that heavily influenced me, and in so should be records that every serious hard rock, metal, and heavy music lover has in their collection. So let's just start at the top, and I'm going to give my short bursts of opinions. I'm not sure how long this one will go, but we're going to start right at the very first one. I believe it was around 1986. I was in maybe 7th, 8th grade, about 9th grade. Actually, I was in 9th grade. And Metallica, Master of Puppets, come out. True height of Metallica in all its glory to me. It was everything that any metal fan could wish. Power, precision in its purest form. Just one song after another. There's really not a bad song. Whether you want the lowest in Sanitarium, whether it's the classic Master of Puppets, whether it's The Thing That Should Not Be, or whether it's the ending of the album where you get Damage Incorporated, which is my favorite track on the record. So that's going to start us off. The next one on the list, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. When it came out, the world wasn't ready. They took the world by storm, and to this day, some of the grittiest, gut-level hard rock ever recorded. Lightning in a Bottle. The band has never been able to recapture the pure sound of it, and it was a total band effort. If you took any one piece of that puzzle away, at that time, it would have made it a totally different record. Whether it was Slash or Duff or Izzy, any other person being different in that band, you would have had a completely different record. So, Appetite for Destruction. The next one, Skid Row, Slave to the Grind. And yes, I realize these are all well-known records. Probably records that not only influenced me, but influenced hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, probably millions of others as well. So, Slave to the Grind, it represents everything that is awesome about hard rock to me. You have awesome lyrics in the songs like Quicksand Jesus, In a Darkened Room, Monkey Business. You have the in-the-face guitars, and you have Sebastian's vocals. And of everything that Skid Row has done over the years, this is the record that just slams the hardest. I mean, this is the record that, to me, is one of the definitive hard rock records to have. The next one, I'm going to group these two together because, with the recent passing of Ozzy, it's essential that I have these two. So the first one is going to be Black Sabbath's Paranoid. I'm not a massive Sabbath fan. I'm not one who listens to a ton of Sabbath. But I have a ton of respect for them. And could you really make a list of influential metal and hard rock records without including this song or this record? Probably. I wrote down probably the second most imitated band in hard rock and metal. I guess you could argue between Zeppelin and Sabbath, which one has been more imitated over the years. But, one of the two most imitated bands. And then right behind that comes Ozzy with Blizzard of Oz. It's the first solo record immediately following I don't want to say the breakup of Sabbath, but Ozzy leaving Sabbath. You have Randy Rhoads with his Wild Child guitars. You have Ozzy's lyrical caricatures. It's one of the most endearing legacies in all of music. And it all starts with Blizzard of Oz and all of the amazing songs that are on that record. The next one on the list, AC/DC, Back in Black. Again, a no-brainer. It's the first album with Brian Johnson. The band considered breaking up after the death of Bon Scott. What they did instead was return with one of the most thunderous metal records ever. Absolutely nothing soft about Back in Black. There's no ballads. It's a foot-stomping, punch-your-mother-in-the-face rock and roll record from beginning to end. It's just that simple. I mean, they're not trying to be cutesy, smart, or anything else. AC/DC has never tried to reinvent the wheel. It's just 3 chords, kick you in your balls, let's blow the roof, no pun intended, off the joint. Next one I have on my list is Def Leppard with Hysteria. CD was essentially the reinvention of Def Leppard. After the early days of On Through the Night and High and Dry and Pyromania, it's 4 years in the making. One of the most anticipated CDs, probably, maybe next to Chinese Democracy. But what the band endured during these 4 years was crazy. You had, Rick losing an arm. They didn't break up, Your typical band would have replaced the drummer. They would have replaced the missing piece at that point, sort of, for lack of a better term. But they sort of, again, reinvented the wheel. And he learned to drum with one hand in the new drum kit and all of that. And they pushed through and created this monster record. One of the most rock-solid collections of songs ever put together. 70 minutes in length. And it's an example of 5 guys that were born to play rock and roll together, for the most part. I mean, it's just still to this day stands up as an incredible collection of songs, whether it's Armageddon It, whether it's Rocket, whether it's Pour Some Sugar on Me, Hysteria, just from beginning to end, this is a solid record. And I know this list is going to jump all over the place. I don't apologize for that. Anyone who knows me knows it was a chore just getting this list to only be within the hard rock and metal genres, because I had a whole bunch of shit that I added to this list in the beginning. Bob Seger, Boston, Air Supply, Meatloaf, just to name a few, Blackfoot, that I was kind of like, okay, I'm getting off topic. So we're going to continue on. The next one, Rage Against the Machine with the self-titled record. I think it was about 91 it come out. 92 maybe. What a debut. I can't think of another debut record that's really kind of kicked my ass the way this one did. I mean, this was just it was just a complete kick to the balls. You had Zach doing what Zach did with the screeching vocals. You had Tom with his guitar. You had songs like Bomb Track and Know Your Enemy that were just monstrous songs that even to this day you can play those songs and they're just, the tone of Tom's guitar is really all there. And while I don't always agree with their political philosophy, that's par for the course for me. I don't agree with 3/4 of what Henry Rollins says, but anybody who knows me knows I think Henry Rollins is a God among men, and thank the Lord for letting me live during the same time as Henry frickin' Rollins. So, yeah. I don't have to agree with somebody. I just got to listen to their music and think, man, that rocks like hell. And yeah, next one is Van Halen, self-titled, Van Halen 1, for the guitar freaks. It's a guitar player's wet dream in a music form. It's from beginning to end, Eddie plays some of the most innovative guitar ever on the CD. And every major guitar player since then has imitated Eddie's style in some way. And good or bad, depending on how you feel about Eddie. This is where it all started. Next one on the list is going to be the second Metallica record, the only band with 2. Immediately following up Master of Puppets, the band put out And Justice for All, which was a major feat after the accident, after losing Cliff, having to hire a new bassist, which was Jason Newsted, and sort of start from the beginning again. And in doing so, essentially created a thunderous, gigantic collection of songs, from the opening riffs of Blackened to the faster than death riff, closing riffs of Dyer's Eve, which is my favorite all-time Metallica song. Dear mother, dear father, what is this hell you have put us through? That's my poor imitation of Metallica. as a monster collection, dark, prodding, brilliant in every way, it was a resounding yes to whether the band would survive. And let's be honest, how many of us have not banged our freaking heads to one more than at least 100 times? So, one essentially ended up being the centerpiece of this record, but, just everything about this record was really great. And probably the last great Metallica record. Go ahead, all your hate mail, it can go to whodis@kissmyballs.com if you disagree. Moving along, Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. One of the first records that I personally wanted to own. It's a record that made me a hard rock fan. Before Shout at the Devil, I kind of was more of a classic rock guy. A lot of Chicago, a lot of Survivor, a lot of REO Speedwagon, a lot of what would be considered classic rock by today's standards. Nugent, Slade, a few bands like that. But Crue was Shout at the Devil was the record that when I heard it, I wanted it so badly. My father absolutely refused to buy me the record. On the title alone, it was not going to be allowed. We had a family Christmas party where names were drawn, and whoever got your name bought you that gift, or you bought them the gift. And my Aunt Connie got my name. My Aunt Carrie got my Uncle Cliff's name. My Uncle Cliff is about a year and a half older than me. And I don't mean to hurt any feelings in saying this, but my Aunt Connie bought me one of the ugliest Christmas sweaters I've ever seen in my life. It was from Hudson's, if you remember the old Hudson's in Michigan, Hudson's department store, which I think is now owned by Macy's. It was a work of horrific fashion. It belonged in the back of an 80s themed closet somewhere to be hidden forever. And I opened it and graciously smiled and said thank you, and thought this thing will never see the light of day. Ever. And my Uncle Cliff, who was the preppy, geeky type, saw my sweater and said, "Oh my God, that's awesome." And I thought, yeah, whatever. And he opened his gift, and my Aunt Carrie, who is the twin of my Aunt Connie, had bought him the Motley Crue record that I wanted. And I thought, son of a bitch, the preppy geek is going to get a Motley Crue record that he will never listen to because he's a fan of Elton John and Bruce Springsteen and the Police and Prince and other Hot 40 stuff of that time. And he looked at the record and he was like, I don't even know who this is. And my brain kicked into overdrive and said, hey, I'll trade you the sweater for the record. And he shoved the record to me, I shoved the sweater to him, and I ran like hell. And my dad just said, fuck it, let him have it. And that is how I got my first Motley Crue record. Long story short, still to this day, one of only 2 Motley Crue records that I like. Next one on the list, let's go up to Canada. We have Rush with 2112. Yes. Before this, nothing had really ever been attempted to that degree for progressive rock. Floyd might have done a few things, but not with the heaviness, not with the thunderous approach that Rush took. They single-handedly took progressive rock and progressive metal to a whole new level. From the acoustic-sounding Oracle to the metallic-sounding The Temples of Syrinx, or Syrinx, however you say it. It's a masterpiece of the highest degree. The only word that comes to mind for this record, essentially, is epic. Still one of the best Rush CDs there is. Next one on my list is Aerosmith Rocks. So, Toys in the Attic brought Aerosmith to the game. Rocks made him the master of ceremonies. Everyone from Slash to Kirk Hammett has stated how this was the album that made them want to be rock stars. This album has more swagger and balls than just about anything else ever relieved. And I wrote, put this in your CD player and get your rocks off. So I took a bunch of notes on these, and I'm just reading notes, essentially, of what I wrote. So the next one, Scorpions, Love at First Sting. Sure, the Scorps had been around for close to 15 years when it was released. They had hit with a number of killer albums earlier, such as Blackout and Love Drive, and they were a band that most people knew well. This was the album that made them a name that everyone loved. Rock You Like a Hurricane and Big City Nights were 2 of the biggest anthems at that time, and it's just massive guitars. The vocals were dead on. The riffs, man. Like, sure, there were Scorpion songs before that, but come on, when you heard "Rock You Like a Hurricane," you know, it's just, you knew. You cranked the stereo up, you rocked your ass off, and that whole record is full of cranked out jams. So that is absolutely that. Next one on the list. How about some Iron Maiden? Number of the Beast. Once again, I'll admit that I am not the most massive Iron Maiden fan. I respect Maiden. I listen to them on occasion. But, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that I've seen them thousands of times and I blah, blah, blah. I haven't. I have more respect for Maiden than I have knowledge of Maiden. But what I do know that any true best of list would be incomplete without this. Essentially, this is the greatest hits record before they ever did a greatest hits. Because pretty much every one of the songs on this, short of maybe one, ended up being on their greatest hits list later. So, and it's kind of the record that broke them out of the whole new wave of British heavy metal genre into the mainstream. So, yeah. The next one, Slayer, Rain in Blood. What do I really got to say? I mean, to this day and time, no one has bettered the ferocity, the pace, and the unadulterated aggression of this album. 10 songs in 28 minutes. It leaves no room for a breather. It single-handedly changed the face of thrash and speed metal, and everything before this paled in comparison. In most sense, also pale when put next to this record. For lack of a better way to put it, this is a soundtrack for ripping your neighbor's face off. The next one on my list, Pantera, Cowboys from Hell. I'm not going to go to great lengths for this one. Essentially, you know, it was one of the most amazing records that I'd ever heard when it came out. It was guitars upon guitars with vocals and a rhythm section that was dead on. And it was Dimebag, man. I mean, just the ferocity of Dime's guitar and the rhythm section on this record, with or without Phil. I've always considered Phil kind of to be not essential on this record. You could strip Phil's vocals completely away on Cowboys from Hell and just have the three others, and it would still be one of the most monster metal records ever released, man. It's just that, you know, it is just a killer record on the musical side. Next one, Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime. Sum this up in a short description. Probably the greatest progressive metal record ever recorded. Everything about the CD was perfect. Nothing this brilliant has been achieved since. I have some people who may argue with that thought on that, maybe saying something by Dream Theater or Opeth or a few others, and I have a few that I would put up there. But all in all, for story, for music, and just all the things that this record is, probably the most flawless, perfect progressive metal record as far as a concept record that exists. Next one, Kiss, Rock and Roll Over. After the success of Alive and Destroyer, Kiss had to come with something big. Answer the question if they could follow up after those. And what they brought was bigger and meaner and even more melodic than the other ones. One of the purest collections of rock music ever done. So, and again, often imitated, rarely successfully though. Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. Now I know not everybody's going to like or agree with why this would be on my list, but I remember this CD breaking it all open. You Give Love a Bad Name, Wanted Dead or Alive, you know, there were songs that were massive. They were everywhere. Everybody loved Bon Jovi. Everybody loved Richie. You know, it was a record that tour-wise was everywhere. They took out Alda Nova. They took out Cinderella. They took out Skid Row. So they were not only blowing up themselves, but they were blowing up other bands with them. The band released You Give Love a Bad Name. Everyone wanted on the bandwagon. And there were essentially 1 million copycats overnight. Everyone wanted to sound like Bon Jovi. No one's ever matched what John and Richie did on that record. 20 years and 100 million CDs later, almost 30 years now, what can you say? It was what it was. Whether you like Bon Jovi or not, you can't sit here and say that hard rock, hair metal, whatever term you want to use, did not blow up without Bon Jovi. Next one, this came at the same time, essentially, as the Motley Crue one, as Quiet Riot. Metal Health came almost immediately after Shout at the Devil. Same ferocity and drive that made Crue so huge. Kevin's voice was bigger than life. Songs on that record, it was just pure energy. And you know, Kevin's voice coming in and just that. You know, I've often made the joke that Quiet Riot were the greatest Slade tribute ever, and I don't mean that insultingly. Slade were fucking amazing, and Quiet Riot played on that style and made it bigger and even more bombastic than what Slade already was. So I won't say my personal opinions on Kevin because I had some not so good run-ins with Kevin. I respect the hell out of the rest of the guys. I love that Frankie kept that band going until the very, very end. And even after all the guys are gone, Rudy's kind of still keeping it going. So God bless him. The next one on the list, Manowar. We are the kings of metal. Coming your way. It's the quintessential metal record to me. Recognized as the world's loudest band, or one of the loudest bands. They held, I don't know if they still hold the record, but they held the record for, you know, a while. Always been one of the most truly unrelenting in what they stand for. They've never shied away from being big, dumb, cheesy, and, you know, bombastic. So whether you like the band or not is kind of irrelevant. It's just what it is. And there has been, again, an influence of bands like Hammerfall and Dragon Force and so many other bands that have come after them that have, you know, kind of took that blueprint and ran with it. I saw them one time live. Jet Boy opened for them, and they were so loud that you not only could hear them, the ground underneath our feet was shaking, almost like an earthquake. It was unrelenting for 2+ hours, and I could not hear for 4 days because I made the mistake of going to that show with no ear protection, and 4 days later my ears were still ringing and I was still saying, what? So thank God for Manowar. Next one on the list is Megadeth. Peace sells, but who's buying? Ranks up there with Master of Puppets. The answer to all the critics that questioned if Dave could survive separate of Metallica. CD is, to this day, pure molten metal. The guitar riffs on it are just crazy insane. Dave's vocals. Megadeth has done a ton of really, really great shit, but I don't think anything truly lives up to what they achieved with Peace Sells. So I have 7 more on my list. So we're going to run through these. Next one is Mayhem. Mysterious Dom. Sathanas. I think it's how you say it. I may probably have butchered that. High likelihood. I butchered it. But that's okay. It's a CD that single-handedly changed the face of black metal. Everybody has read stories, heard the rumors, heard all of this stuff about Mayhem, about Dead, about Uranus, about his suicide note being one line, sorry for the mess, them taking pieces of his skull and making necklaces, the Lords of Chaos stories, the connection to Varg, and all of this other stuff. But at the end of the day, it's actually one of the most brutal, crushing CDs really put together musically. I mean, it was way ahead of its time for that genre. And short of a few bands, very few bands have really achieved that very calculated sound that Mayhem had on that record, including Mayhem themselves. It never really quite lived up to anything after that. The next one, I'm going to talk about this one for a minute. Probably one of the ones that influences me the most because I got to meet him. I got to hang out with him and knew him as a person. Mother Love Bone. It's the band that preceded Pearl Jam, obviously. Seattle band. I had the amazing vocalist Adam Wood, along with 3 other guys that would later go on to form Pearl Jam after Andrew's untimely death of a heroin addiction. All of that aside, though, one of the most critically acclaimed debut releases ever. A record that should have made them probably even bigger than what Pearl Jam become, even bigger than what Soundgarden become. Nirvana probably never gets off of the starting line without the void that is left by Mother Love Bone breaking up. Because if Mother Love Bone continues down their path, if Andrew lives, they essentially become Nirvana. they become the band that will lead Seattle. Soundgarden probably would have still thing, but Pearl Jam never exists. And a lot of the bands that followed, it's a completely different landscape. So to understand how big of a loss Andrew was, you take into account that the pallbearers for Andrew for his funeral were Chris Cornell, Stone Gossard, Jerry Cantrell, Chris DeGarmo, Kim Thayil, and Dave Grohl. And if that's not a who's who of rock and roll royalty after the fact, none of those guys had achieved true stardom at that point, other than Chris DeGarmo with Queensryche. All of those guys went on to be massive stars. Funeral attended by over 1,000 people, and CD stands today as what might have possibly gone on to be one of the biggest bands ever. When you listen to it with Shangri-La, A Man of Golden Words, there's song after song after song on that record. Your brain can't help but wonder what rock and roll music would have been like in the 90s and going forward if Mother Love Bone doesn't lose Andrew. Because it's a game changer. Everything changes. The direction that labels took, everything changes if Mother Love Bone continues forward and all of these other bands don't fall into place where they eventually fell into place. The next one, Twisted Sister with Stay Hungry. I know some people question Twisted Sister's legacy, but what a great way to be represented as a band. I Want to Rock, We're Not Going to Take It, Mr. Howdy, or, it's a price you gotta pay for all the games you want to play. Makes you wonder if it's worth it to carry on. I mean, it's just, of all of the songs on that record, man, that's the one that I think Dee Snider really put his fucking soul into, man. And I know I'm a terrible singer. I apologize for subjecting you to that. But just, what a great record to this day that still holds up. So, next one is Dream Theater. For the Plague Man, you got to include these guys because Planky got me into them. And this is the first record. There's been a ton since, including live shows and other stuff. Road trips to Cleveland to see Petrucci solo. The first time he played with Portnoy after decades of being apart. The band took what Queensryche started, made it bigger, better, faster. Amazing guitar playing, awesome bass, gothic sounding keyboards. Images and Words was a sonic masterpiece. It set them up for everything that they've done since, but it all comes together on Images and Words. So, and I know everyone, pull me under, but in the short of it, Pull Me Under is actually one of the worst songs on that record. So, yeah, I said it. 3 final songs. Sabotage, Gutter Ballet. When this song come out, or when this record came out, I was already a fan with Hall of the Mountain King. But this was the record that took what Sabotage had done before and, man, just turned it on its head and made them what people now love the most about them. They took metal and they mixed it with Broadway. I compare this band, you can say they were Meatloaf on steroids. Paul and John essentially took what Jim Steinman had started with Meatloaf and they cranked it to 100. They made it bigger, better, more powerful, more gothic, and, mixing the heaviest aspects of metal with the best conceptual aspects of progressive rock and Broadway. The band really had something for everybody. And while you had the heavy songs in this, towards the ending of it, where, the turn 'em on again, when the crowds are gone. It was the song, man, that it'll bring a tear to your fucking eye, and it's such a powerful, one of the last records that had Chris on it. I think there were 2 more after that had Chris on it, but just a masterclass of Chris's guitar playing on this damn record. So, and it led essentially to them doing Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It's, again, damn near 30 years later, is still holding their own, doing the Christmas version of Gutter Ballet. So, yeah. And the last 2. First of the last 2, we're going to go to Stryper. Why am I going to Stryper? Because the CD took Christian metal to the mainstream. And as someone who was raised around churches and got told all of the time that the music I listened to was devil music and it was evil and blah, 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 it was awesome to finally have a band that I could listen to that was heavy and fast and over the top, but yet I could listen to it and shove it in their face saying, hey, I listen to metal and it has biblical lyrics, has biblical references, and Stryper was a massive gateway. Whether or not you like Stryper, you cannot question their work ethic. You cannot question their integrity or their musical ability. Whether it is Oz's guitar playing, whether it's Michael's vocals. To this day, I don't know how he has continued to be able to hit the notes that he has. Or the biggest aspect of this band, the most underlooked aspect of this band, is Robert's drumming. You know, they call him the timekeeper, and the man is a freaking machine. Some of the most flawless drumming that you will hear on any hard rock metal record ever. It's just that simple. It's To Hell with the Devil, man, is that record, and it was, again, a gateway. It led to me getting into bands like Deliverance, bands like Saint, bands like Bride, bands like the Res Band. It led me to X-Sinner. It led me to Recon. It led me to so many other bands that I would have never heard and become massive fans of, whether it was Angelica or whether it was Mass. You know, again, just a laundry list of bands that I become a fan of, thanks to Stryper and what they do and continue to do. So, do you have to love Stryper? No. Do you have to respect Stryper? Abso-freaking-lutely. And let me say my absolute condolences and deepest prayers go out to them on the loss of their father recently. I can't imagine what those guys felt knowing at being on tour and not being able to just walk away from it all during that time. Must have weighed on them. But I have no doubt that they will handle it with the grace that they've always had. I've interviewed Michael a couple times, and it's just an absolute gentleman who I respect to the moon and back as somebody who just wears his heart on his sleeve. And I have two more. Actually, one was mixed in. The next one was Extreme Pornography. The first Extreme record kind of put him on the map. This one just blew the map up. It burst into the scene with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Do you want to play? And then they just went even bigger on this one. Kind of a concept album, loosely, the story of Francis. I know More Than Words became the centerpiece of this record and still the song that everyone will kind of gravitate towards. But when you have songs that get the funk out, President, just song after song, you know, Nuno has proven, again, almost 30 years later, that he's still one of the most grossly overlooked, slept-on guitar players. You know, in the guitar circles, yes, everyone knows Nuno. Everybody respects Nuno. Everybody knows how great Nuno is. But in just the kind of overall thing, if people were naming off greatest guitar players, you know, you're going to get Eddie, you're going to get Randy Rhoads, you're going to get Mick Mars, you're going to get this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And then way down on a lot of people's list, somebody is going to come in and say, oh, what about Nuno? When the reality is Nuno should be one of the first 4 or 5 people you mention. It's that simple. I mean, of course you're going to name Eddie. And of course you're going to name Randy. And of course you're going to name whatnot. But shortly after those 3, you should hear Nuno's name. He should not be any lower than 4th or 5th on anyone's list. Ever. He's just too fucking amazing. And, you know, a phenomenal singer in his own right, as well as a guitar player. Gary is perfect. Let's not look past Pat as a bass player and backup vocalist, man. Not enough people talk about how fucking awesome Pat is. Because Pat is fucking phenomenal as the third piece to that band that really runs the machine. And the very last one I'm going to bring up, this is actually 31, not 30. The very last one I'm bringing up is Out of the Cellar by Ratt. It ranks alongside Cinderella and Poison as party anthems to the highest degree at that time. Not a huge fan of Stevens' vocals, but I love the music. I love the songs. And whether or not you like the vocals or enjoy the vocals, they go perfectly with these songs. Round and Round, lack of communication, this is just a record of the first degree for that time period. And, they had the looks, they had the swagger, they had all of the right pieces to be exactly what Ratt was. So that is my list. 31 records that influenced me. With that said, I hope everyone is well. If you want to be a part of this show, The Loud List, you can email me at riotonthesetmedia@gmail.com. We can do a top 10 list of anything that your brain can conceive. I have a pre-set list, but we can also come up with anything, whether it's music, movies, books, pop culture, cooking, baking, whatever. If your brain can come up with any idea for a top 10 list, let's do it. I would love to have you on the show. Come join the loud crowd, as we're known, the people that rotate in and out on here. But with all that said, I hope you're well. So be well, treat each other with kindness, and remember that music heals.